Hello, how are you?
Okay.
Okay. Another rainy day?
Not yet. It's not rained yet, but it will.
Oh, goodness. Every time, every day we have sun, sun, sun. I keep thinking you poor guys with all that rain all the time.
Oh, we had a nice weekend.
Yes,
Warm and
I
sunny.
saw that. Yeah, we had a Zoom on Sunday. And are you on live stream now?
Yeah, you're on live. So don't say anything you don't want the world to hear.
Keep it secret.
Now you've really increased interest.
Yeah, right.
I know Kathy Myers wants to come. She sent an email. I don't know about Colette. I'm going to check my phone to make sure they got their invites.
Maybe everybody's got Zoom fatigue.
They might. They might indeed. It's a thing. It is a thing. I don't have it.
No, it's the only way to keep in touch, Nick.
I know. Let's see. Here she is. Colette almost is always on. I don't know where she is right now. Maybe she's just going to stay on the live. Oh, there we go. And we got some more waiting to come in. Colette is trying to enter. There she comes. Hello, Colette.
There's a little note, Louie, on top of your face. It says, Louie Kilgore's network bandwidth is low.
Huh. Well.
So.
Oh, you know what? Let me see what happened. Hello. Hi, Colette. How are you?
Because you got no fingerprint, that's why.
Well, you still recognize me, right?
I put in the number and they said, leave the meeting, that's not the right number.
Oh.
Now that is weird. All right, I'm going to change.
Is it 896?
I don't know. I don't use the number to come in.
953.
I don't know. I didn't write it down. I don't usually use the number to come in because you should be able to just use the wait a minute. Am I gone now? No, there you are. I tried to switch over to my other is that message still there?
Yeah, it's still there, and every once in a while you're freezing, so I guess, yeah, it must be accurate. Your bandwidth must be low.
Well, there's several Wi-Fis that are available in this building, and sometimes the computer will switch without being told. It jumps over to the other. I think I put it back on the strong one now. It should be okay now. There you all are. Well, anyway, let's see what happens. Am I freezing now?
No.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll make it through. This on Monday we had I'm sure this is part of because the internet's being used like never before. But on Monday there was an outage on YouTube. And so the pastor's chat I couldn't do I did it, recorded it and everything, but when I uploaded it, I lost it because YouTube didn't recognize me and said we didn't have an account. So anyway, we got that straightened out. So otherwise, everybody's doing okay, right?
Yeah, so far.
Okay. Well, why don't we begin with a reading? I think we read, did we read 6 last week?
Yes.
Kind of read that completely and through. So we're on to chapter 7 of Job. If you're tuning in for the first time from live stream, I just want to say welcome to you. The group on Zoom is for conversation and comment, but certainly you're welcome to participate by observing and also listening. I think that because the visuals are not great when the Zoom is then broadcast live, that what I'm hearing is most people like to tune in just to hear the discussion. If you want to join the discussion, send me an email even now, and I will send you an invite that should allow you to get in to the room. Okay, and I'll keep my phone here watching for emails. All right, would somebody like to read chapter 7?
I'll read it.
Okay.
It starts, the title is, Why is Life So Hard? Why is life so hard? Why do we suffer? We're slaves in search of shade. We are laborers longing for our wages. God has made my days drag on and my nights miserable. I pray for night to end, but it stretches out while I toss and turn. My parched skin is covered with worms, dirt, and sores, and my days are running out quicker than the thread of a fast-moving needle. Don't forget. I beg you, God, don't forget. My life is just a breath, and trouble lies ahead. I will vanish from sight, and no one, including you, will ever see me again. I will disappear in the grave or vanish from sight like a passing cloud. Never will I return home. Soon I will be forgotten. And so I cry out to you in agony and distress. Am I the sea or a sea monster? Is that why you imprison me? I go to bed hoping for rest, but you torture me with terrible dreams. I'd rather choke to death than live in this body. Leave me alone and let me die. My life has no meaning. What makes you so concerned about us humans? Why do you test us from sunrise to sunset? Won't you look away just long enough for me to swallow? Why do you watch us so closely? What's it to you if I sin? Why am I your target and such a heavy burden? Why do you refuse to forgive? Soon you won't find me because I'll be dead.
Well, that's a bright and cheery reading for a Wednesday morning. Hi, Kathy. Kathy, can you hear us? I don't know if she can hear us. Kathy, can you hear us? Your sound is not on. I don't think she can hear us. What do you all think?
I think not. She needs to click her audio on.
Usually I can send a message, but I can't do that right now.
Oh,
Well, there she left. She's going to try to come back in again. So while we're
Yeah.
waiting for her to figure it out, you have anything you want to say?
yeah. These passages are not helping with this pandemic.
No.
It's just making it worse. I think most people would say, "Hey, Job, I know the feeling."
It's not why is life so hard, it's why is life impossible, the way he's describing it.
Yeah, yeah. There's no question. He's using all of his word and poetic skills to describe the experience of human beings on the earth. And notice he's not just talking about himself either. He talked about he's talking about human beings. Why do human beings have to suffer? Why, is it all? He's raising the idea that all of it, all of the suffering is a test. That somehow it's all a test. Now, Kathy's going to try to come in again. Maybe this time she'll have... Oh, she's connected on audio now. Yay!
Yay!
All right. All right. That's a lesson for life. Like if you enter a meeting and it's not going well, just leave and come back again.
I went on a different device.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, we were just summarizing that Job. I don't know if you were able to hear or read on your own, but Job is.
No, I couldn't hear a thing.
Well, it's a pretty downer. It's a downer witness from a person who's truly suffering. Verse 13, when I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you scare me with my dreams, and you terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than this body. Wow. I mean, Debbie said that it's a hard text to read during this coronavirus. Yet, it's interesting that this is ancient. This is really old. This is like as old as you can get in words of ancient human beings. And that thing about the dreams are really interesting because one of the things that's happening to a lot of people who are going through this virus pandemic issue is that they do think maybe I'll just get some sleep and then I'll get some rest. But sleep is it's rare, and there is this experience that the fears of the day move into the fears of the night, and then you don't want to go to sleep because you're going to have a bad dream, and it's no refuge, it's no escape, which I find. One of my friends from another community posted, trying to make a joke, of course, was, first thing I think after I eat my breakfast is how long till I can go to bed. There's like, let's get this day over with. Let's get on to a different kind of day or a different kind of living.
Yeah, and we're fasting now for Ramadan, which makes it much longer.
I'm very sorry. And is that a complete fast? What does that mean? You can't eat during the day?
You can't eat from before the sun comes up till sundown. So it's this time of the year, it's a pretty long day.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. You don't eat
Can
until
you drink, or can you?
Can you
nothing.
Nothing to your lips, correct?
Yeah, right.
Nothing to your lips.
Cigarettes, you're not even supposed to smoke.
Well, I don't think you're supposed to smoke anyway with
But I mean, it's that, it's that total. You're supposed to refrain from anything. Anyway, it just makes a longer day. Because it starts so early. if you want to have a meal before the sun comes up, you're supposed to get up around 3:30, 4 o'clock and start making a meal. Yeah. So it's like suhoor comes in really early. And I go out for a couple-mile walk before a lot of people go out. So I feel like my day starts extra early, and by 8 o'clock, have dinner and I fall asleep. And, incidentally, Lou, a lot of people are saying also they've experienced a lot more graphic and colorful dreams, and they wanted to know why. And the explanation that they've been given for that is physicians are saying that because people are going to sleep or falling asleep earlier, that they're having more REM sleep, which is the stage of sleep where you have dreams. And that's happening too. So it goes from one extreme to the other. Either you can't sleep at all or you're sleeping way too much. And, everybody's lives are so disrupted by this.
I thought it was PTSD.
Well, that too.
I'm sure that's part of it too.
Doesn't that have to come after the trauma? Like,
I think we're in it.
yeah,
We're living the trauma.
I lost my neighbor, and another neighbor is struggling to survive. Like
Oh.
2 houses, like the house right next door to mine, and then 2 over, both elderly. But I mean, it really brings it home. Really brings it home.
yeah. It has moved. It has
I'm
moved
sorry.
into the circles of our lives. I mean, I almost can't talk to anybody these days who doesn't have someone now that they've known has just recently died or is going to die. It's a very big change in the. I suppose there are certainly cultures of the world where the closeness of death is much more prevalent. I mean, you look at the continent of Africa during the AIDS epidemic, and then people were dying all the time. They were dying all over the place, mothers and fathers, and the orphans, the production of orphans because of death. But I mean, I've read about it, but I've never had a week in my life where I learned of 6 people dying that I knew. Like that's not ever happened before, and so it does. Debbie, when you were talking before about how people are saying that their dreams are more colorful, and I've had dreams that I feel like are inviting me to put thinking parentheses around my life, like dreams that go way back and then they run long and come up to the contemporary time, so that if you've been through a period of your life, you can take stock of it. So my dreams are like that. They're like people from all different parts of my life are somehow, in a crazy way, like dreams are. They're all in it. So it's I don't know. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's upsetting. Sometimes it ends up with me making a commitment to say, I was always going to work on that issue. I probably ought to work on that now. Like, I don't know. It's I don't know. I feel like we're all going through a big experiment.
I feel like we're in a movie, and it's not a good one.
Yeah.
You want to wake up from the nightmare.
The locusts are coming now. We have murder bees.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I mean, are we in the midst of revelations here?
Biblical times. Yeah.
What's happening?
These are biblical events.
It really
Plagues.
is. It really is. This is the plague. This is, killer bees. It's like, what is happening? I mean, at first I thought this is kind of good. It brings everybody back together. It's like, it's scary. It's terrible, but we'll get through it. But then it's just one thing after another. It's just a little scary.
It reminds me of when I was diagnosed with shingles in 2012, and it was the one that was in the nerve of my eye up to the top of my head. It's the one that blinded me. And when you were reading that text, I said, that's just the way I felt. I said, let me die, because I was home. Was misdiagnosed,
Oh,
and I was home with the shingles for almost a week. I probably wouldn't have been blinded if I hadn't been misdiagnosed, but it was hell, hell, hell. Awful.
And that was just a week.
Yeah.
When you think Job went through this for like forever.
I'm stepping away for a second to invite Elaine Griswold, who just asked to be invited. I had invited her before, but I don't know, it must not have gone through. Okay, let's see if I can... E. Griswold. I hope that's the one. Okay, there we go. I apologize for interrupting the train of thought there. Okay. So the feeling of, you know, having shingles in your eye and then leading to a blindness in your eye, and that period of time going through that, I was trying to think when you were saying that how many times in my life, if ever, I have felt so bad, like to feel bad, that bad. And I mean, maybe I'm a sissy in a way, but I have, with much less than what Job is dealing with, I have felt that. I have touched that level of despair in my life. And I'm not proud to say it. There are other people, I guess, that I can say would have endured better with a greater posture. And I think about my grandfather on my mom's side had a condition in life called trifacial neuralgia, which was it was an inflammation of his face due to a nerve that comes out of the back off of the spinal cord. And you know, I was an inquisitive kid, so I asked him. I said, what does it feel like? Because he was often taking massive amounts of painkiller. And at the time, we were in a kind of a log cabin where we were being heated with a coal stove. And he said to me, I'm not exaggerating, but my cheek and to my chin feels like what it would feel like if you were to lay your face on the coal stove. And I was shocked, you know, with the level of pain that he was managing. And he was a very proud man, too, so he didn't ever want to show it. He didn't ever want to talk about it. But he was enduring really intense levels of pain. And, you know, there were people that told him, you know, you can go and have the nerve cut, but they didn't really have a good map of the nerve system, and so they were worried that if they cut his nerve, that his whole face would go dead, and he would lose expression in his eyes, and his mouth would drool, and he just decided to tough it out. In the end, he died related to overdosing on the pain medication, because it was painful. And so in the middle of that, I mean, in the middle, so Job's words are hard to read. He says at one point, remember in the reading, am I the Leviathan? Am I a sea monster, or am I the sea? And there's a reference there to stories, that extra biblical stories that say that after the creation, there was this monster in the sea that had been created by God, but it was out of control, and that God had to come down and put a muzzle on it. I've never read that story, but the footnote in the study Bible references it. And the point is that, well, allow me to wax back a little bit to relay the foundation of the theology of these ancient ones. Their struggle was different than ours in terms of how are we to think about this. They only knew of three elements in the creation. There is God, there is the created order, which is everything else around us, and human beings, males and females. That's it. They didn't know of, even though in the beginning of Job it talks about the Satan, but everything that exists comes out of God. It's just us and God and nature. That's it. And it's tempting sometimes when we try to interpret the Bible, then we take a different worldview that we have, which is we are more dualistic. We see the world and life and created order as a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And that's, I mean, that's in our language. It's built into our the culture of how we understand the world. However, it was not part of the way the ancients saw the world. And what that means is they take on a bigger task. If you go to the dualistic view of the world, in some ways the world is easier to explain. Because you can explain the world by saying, well, there's evil in the world. We don't have to answer how it got there, but there's evil in the world, and God is at work fighting against the evil of the world. And so you see life as this struggle. And then we're caught up in it. And then, of course, God is always pulling for us to come to the good. And then the forces of evil are always trying to tear us down. And very much like a Star Wars movie. Job has a very... Go ahead.
I don't think, well, there's no Gnosticism in this passage, but
Right.
he certainly is looking at God's dominion over the creation in a kind of a novel way. He's saying, am I the Leviathan that you have to set a guard on me? Why are you watching me day and night? What is the purpose of you keeping tabs on what I am and what I am doing if I mean so little to you that I am suffering so much? I mean, this is really anguish.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's not, practicing Gnosticism. He's not thinking about the devil or God in a battle or, but he's asking why? Why does man mean anything at all if you care so little that you're doing this to me? He is in the depths of despair here. He can't go much lower.
Yeah, he doesn't have the out of seeing any other cause. God isn't just the first cause. God is the ultimate cause of everything. And so he ends up saying, could you just ignore me for a while? Could you just forget I exist for a while? Could you know what? Whatever's going on in your plan right now, I'm going to raise my hand. I just want to step out of it. Can I get out of it? And what's behind that too, again in the footnotes, the study Bible says that, there's a psalm that marvels in the fact that what is human beings that you are mindful of them. We are so small. That image of the child in the boat. My boat is so small and the ocean is so large. And the psalmist marvels at the fact. And that my life, could my little life, here on this little dot of the globe, how could it be possible? And in the psalm, they're marveling about it as a wonderful thing that God pays attention to my little life and uses God's omnipotent power and knowledge to know me. Job turns that upside down. Job says, you know what? If it would be all right with you, maybe the way things are going, maybe you could just think of me like a stone on the road. And could you ignore me for a while? Because this isn't going well. And it's, again, I'm reminded to go back to remind us all that in reading this, we have the narrator's point of view. We have an answer here that Job does not have. We are the all-knowing ones in this story as readers.
So we have the Gnostic viewpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Satan or Iblis against God, and whose servant is Job?
Well, yeah, I think that's right. I think Gnostic in the sense that we have knowledge that is hidden from Job. We know about the bet. We know about the deal that was made. But I wouldn't push it as far as saying it's a fight between Job, or between God and the Satan. And it's very important to keep the contest is a contest within God. There's a contest within God, and it's almost an arrogance on the part of God to show that a human being is 100% faithful to God. That faith and true devotion is actually possible, even in a difficult world. Now, if, again, I'll keep talking until you interrupt me right now, because it occurs to me, think about the claim about Jesus' sinlessness. That Christians, when they truly follow what I believe is the core of our Christian faith, Jesus also suffers like Job. He suffers without a clear sense of, like, all this suffering is coming on me. All of it. Here comes Elaine Griswold. If all of this suffering is coming, all this suffering is coming on me. All of it. Here comes Elaine Griswold. And there's a connection between. Hi, Elaine. Is coming. All this suffering is coming on me. All of it. Here comes Elaine Griswold. And there's a connection. Hi, Elaine.
Hi. I've been listening.
Okay. So
Thanks, Barb.
You're welcome. I invited.
Oh, good. I don't know why my invite wasn't getting to you.
I've been listening.
Okay.
Thanks, Barb.
You're welcome. I invited.
I'm having a weird time delay between my talking and my listening.
We're getting that echo as well. Yep.
You are. Let me see if is it still happening now?
Yeah.
Okay.
A weird time delay.
Nope, there it is.
Listening.
I think I may have fixed it.
All right. I don't know. Okay. So again, I'm not trying to say that you should not hear Job because of Jesus or the other way around, but that realize Job's question, how can I make myself so small, God, that you won't care about me? Because when you care about me, it's not good. Like, I'd really like you to stop caring about me. Now, think about how reverse, how upside down that is in terms of what often happens in the plea of people who are suffering. It's like, God, come, be with me. Job is saying, could you leave? And again, I always hear the text, the ancients, in terms of trying to listen to the actual dynamics of what happens in human relationships. Because I am convinced from page 1 to the last page, the biblical witness is about relationships. It's about relationships between God and humans and humans and humans. And I don't think I've ever been there, but I know it's not that rare that if you were trying to take care of someone and they're not getting better, and things are not getting better and they're getting worse, that there is this place in the relationship where the person who is receiving the care might actually say to the caregiver, would you just leave me alone? Could you just get out of here and leave me with my pain? Because right now, the attention that you're giving to me is making it worse. Right? Now, so a lot of you nodded and laughed a little bit, but isn't that true to life? Doesn't that happen?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking of the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And that's, I felt, Rabbi Kushner always felt that, he should be able to do something. And I feel that's what I feel when someone has a problem. I need to fix it. And yet here, Job is saying, go away because you're not fixing it. You're making it worse. So just let me go hide in a corner for a while or something.
And it may be doing too much to take away what Job is actually trying to say. But remember last week we realized that when Job was talking to his friend, that the conversations with his friend that referenced God and others weren't really about God. They were about the friend. They were about Job trying to say to his friend, if you are a friend, I need enemies. It wasn't just who needs enemies. It was if what you're doing is friendship to me, then I need a couple good enemies, because no enemy would do this to me. And I think there's a connection between the themes of chapter 6 and the themes of chapter 7. So far, who has come to help Job? Eliphaz has come to help Job. And I think, again, trying to keep it grounded in real life. I don't think that this is a mystical fantasy. This is real life. And Job is trying to hammer out some sense of why, some sense of meaning and purpose in the middle of life's difficulty. And a lot of what passes in my world as explanations for that won't pass muster with Job. They won't. Don't tell me that God is at work doing something good, producing perseverance in my life. You can leave now. You can just go.
I can't help but think that this is more like a menage a trois, though. Job doesn't know that the shaitan is in on this and what's happening. But I think Iblis, or the shaitan, is doing what is his role. When he was thrown out of paradise, then he vowed that he would be the one to stand in front of humankind and bring them down. And here he's trying his best to do that to Job. And God is really kind of taking, a step back and saying, okay, let's see you do your worst. I believe in my servant Job. I think it's kind of cruel that Job isn't aware of the dynamics of, what's actually a threesome here instead of just Job and God. But well, we know the end of the story, so can't.
Yeah,
it's hard to be too upset. But yeah,
we are clearly given what's called the God's eye view. In literary criticism, the reader is often given the God's eye view to know what no one else in the story knows. It makes for good reading. It makes for good storytelling. To go back to what you said, Debbie, I still, this is an issue I struggle for as a teacher of the Bible all the time. Remember, the Satan and the story of the devil being an angel that was thrown down and all. We have been reading through the Bible. It's not part of the biblical tradition. It's not.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I'm going back and forth between the Quran and the Bible, and in the Quran, it's absolutely Iblis that's
Right.
doing this.
Right, and that, like, having said that, I often say to some of you, I've said, I'm not trying to tell you which one's the right one, but my job is to make clear that if you're going to read the Bible and understand the Bible, you have to understand its own terms. You have to understand. It's not satisfactory. I'm just going to say it right out. It is not satisfactory. But in the theology, the ancient theology of Job, the Satan is not an argument that's going on in the universe between God and the forces of evil.
Right.
It is a, you call it a what was that French phrase that you used?
A menage a trois.
Right. It is more like a marital argument between the spouses. The Satan and God, or the supreme being, these are elements within God, contained in the heavens, not thrown out, not opposing God. God does not get angry with the suggestion of the Satan. God says, good, let's do it. Let's do it. Because the discussion is, and I go back to say this because it felt really good when I said it before. The discussion is, can there be a human being on the earth who would trust in God and believe in God no matter how bad the circumstances got? That's front and center in terms of what's supposed to guide our listening to this discussion. Job doesn't know that. He doesn't know. The answer to the question, which is, God, why are you paying so much attention to me? We know the answer to that. We know. We should get down there and talk to Job and say, let me tell you what's going on. God is having an argument in God's household about you. And the good news is God believes that you will be faithful no matter what. And God has so much attention on you. And I think, interesting that Jesus, when Jesus is in the pits of being betrayed and no one is with him and no one believes him and no one understands that he's suffering for righteousness' sake. He's suffering for healing the sick. He's suffering for attending to the lepers. He's suffering and he's going to die because of that. That his prayer is I forget what I was going to say now, but he comes at this with a different view. Oh, I know. He simply asks to be released. If the cup can pass from me, let me not go through this. But, and then this is where I was headed with it is, I'm always fascinated that the history records Jesus' words, "Why have you forsaken me?" Think about how different that is than what Job ends up saying. Job says, "Why don't you forsake me for a while? Like, why don't you just leave me alone?" And Jesus, in the middle of his suffering, says, "It feels like you don't even know I'm here. It feels like you've forgotten about me." And so I guess in the end, these two characters, these two biblical giants of faith, Jesus and Job, are still presenting us with very difficult questions to answer. And in some ways, I feel like in my pastoral work, I try to encourage people to be content with no answer. For me, I'd rather see people say, okay, well, I've come up against it. I don't know what the answer is for here. I feel like you're better off. You're better off to stay there than you are to go off on the highways that people invent with these massive explanations about why things happen in our lives. I'm like, no, you ought to just stay in lament. What Job is doing, the psalmist and the Hebrew culture called lament. And that is your complete permission, without any judgment, to go up to the top of the mountain, form a fist out of your hand, and rail at God for the way life is. Not because if you rail at God, then somehow you'll come to an answer about why you had to go through the suffering that you went through. No. That's not there for us. It's there for us in the reading of Job because we're the readers. We have the God's eye view. It never really, maybe I'm forgetting. I don't think it's ever even revealed to Job. Even in the end. Why what happened to him happened to him. It's, it's like.
I think in the biblical accounts of Job, and you're contrasting it with Jesus and their communications with God, I think you hit on a curious thing here, because Job seems to be saying to God, I know I'm not important. I'm not important to you as a human being. You've made other creations that are probably much more important than me. Why don't you just forget about me right now and just let me go into the earth and disappear? Whereas Jesus knows that he's important, that humanity is extremely important to God. He's even told the disciples, who are the birds of the field? They don't work, and yet God thinks of them enough to clothe them. Are you not as important as the birds? Jesus knows humanity's position in God's world. So, of course, he's going to say, why did you forsake me? Because I know how you feel about me. So why are you forsaking me? Whereas Job, I'm not so sure Job is ready to obey God, but he doesn't really think at this point that God cares that much about humanity. I think that may be the difference in the biblical passages.
I like everything you said. I think it's really interesting to hold the two of them up in terms of the witness we have about them. Because here's Job. I mean, who was Job before the bet? Who was Job before the bet? He was, I feel like if he was interviewed by the journalists, he would say, look, what was I doing? I'm just living my life, I'm living my life. My faith is simple. I trust in God. I have a deep and abiding trust in God. And by the way, I don't even know where it came from. My guess about him is he probably wasn't a guy that went around and even said it a lot. It's just how he lived. It's just part of who he is. And he wants to be part of the scenery. He just wants to be part of the scenery, like a tree responds when the rain comes and it grows and the sun shines, and he just wants to be a soybean plant in the field. Just let me go back to being just one of your creatures that responds when I'm supposed to respond. And Job's faith, you get a picture of Job's faith here. It's earthy, it's meaty, it isn't philosophical, it's not worked out. I don't know if Job even went to church. He just couldn't not trust in God. And I don't, I think if I was there in the conference of the Godhead, I would ask, so if you could make one human being like that, why don't you make us all that way? Seriously. I mean, what is all what's all this contingency about? I thought that, to be human was you had to live with the inability to trust. No, Job says, it reminds me, my Old Testament professor, I did not like this, by the way, when my Old Testament professor said this. In fact, I told him so. He said, he believed he had a brother. So he's an Old Testament professor, a man of faith, deep of faith, scholar, a great scholar of the Old Testament, partners with Jewish scholars, has lived a great life of humility. And he said he has a brother who's an atheist, who is just absolute atheist. And he told us in a lunchroom conversation one day that he believes the day will come that when they're mapping the human genome, they will find a gene for faith. And that some people have it and some people don't. And I hated it. I hated when he said that. I just almost came across the lunch table at him to say, that's awful. And he had been raised in the American Baptist tradition, not in John Calvin's tradition, because that idea really fits with John Calvin's view. And I don't know. I don't like that. I just hated it. But
How do you feel about it now?
well, I'm still pretty animated when I'm talking about it. But what I have come to appreciate in it, which is why he unfolded it to us as young theology students, was he said, when and if that happens, then people of faith will stop judging people who don't have faith.
Yeah.
And he said, and it's a little bit like in the AA movement. They have a similar kind of doctrine in the recovery movement, and that is that you cannot afford an attitude of judgmentalism if you have found recovery and you're sober today. There's nothing in you. Well, maybe this isn't quite the same thing, but the point is, your recovery is a gift. It is a given gift to you. It doesn't come about because of something you've done or something you haven't done. So maybe if I'm listening to Dr. McDaniel talk about the gene for faith as a gift that God gives to some of us,
Exactly.
and then go back to Abraham and Sarah, who were chosen by God, and that the gift of God is given to us, not that we boast, to quote Apostle Paul, but that we recognize that we have a calling in life, to be ministers of grace, to be sharing the blessing of God with those who don't believe.
That's exactly the Quranic view. It says over and over in the Quran, God guides those whom God wants to guide. I think it's the same idea. Some people will have abiding faith and others will fall by the wayside, but that's up to God's grace. Well, I don't know. I, like you, probably don't find that completely satisfying.
No, I don't.
It's to be the condition of humankind. It's hard to explain.
Elaine, you were going to say something.
I think, as a biologist, I think that it's one of those things that's not black or white. I think that it's got gradations. I don't think it's one gene that's dominant or recessive kind of thing. I think it is something that is a conglomerate, kind of like eye color or something like that. That's more, I'm not saying that I don't think God gives it to us as part of our genetic makeup, but I don't think it's the same for everyone, and I do think it has some possible influence from the nurture.
Oh, right. Of course.
I think it's mostly nature, and I think it's more of a continuum than it is yes or no. And I think that it can be affected somewhat by how it's nurtured.
So did you just say you think it's mostly nurture?
No, I think it's mostly nature.
Oh, that's right. That's what I was going to ask you. You think it's mostly nature?
I do. I think the fact that I am a cheerful person is not anything I have done. I don't take any credit. I think it's the way I was born. My mother always said I was a bubbly person. I was like champagne. My sister was like beautiful red wine. We were different. Yeah.
That lets all parents off the hook,
No, I think there is some nurture that's important. But I have seen too many cases where the parents did all the nurturing that you would ever expect anyone to do as a parent, and the child still had problems, serious problems, and I don't think there's anything that person could do about it. For example, addictions. Some people actually have a genetic predisposition to be addicted.
Right.
To alcohol, say.
Right.
That's part of their genetic makeup. And so whatever the parents do, it may not be adequate to change, that in a dramatic way. So,
yeah. I mean,
I do think it's very important that we try to nurture and do the things that are going to be healthy for us, but I don't think that it's the end word. I really don't.
I think that the picture of our faith. I don't think I've ever said this out loud before. So I don't think that it is possible for me to not believe in a higher power.
Right.
I use the word higher power because there's certainly a lot of elements about believing in God or higher power that I have always said, that's not how I understand it. But I've thought, I'm not saying I'm Job. I don't, and I whatever the universe is listening today, I am not interested in a contest. But I do think that there's a deep theology that is coming out of this very, very ancient text, which is right. We're right on target with the conversation we're having right now. We are right into the heart of the narrative, because it is, where does faith come from? What will it endure? How much understanding is ever a part of faith? Anselm, who was one of the interpreters and laying out of the early Christian faith, said that he experienced this journey as if, I have faith. I have faith. I spend most of my life seeking understanding. And I've always like glommed onto that, because I think that's Job. Job is saying, look, okay, God, okay, I have faith. I'm not going anywhere else. Now, could you just leave me alone right now? Because somehow I feel like some of this suffering is coming at me so that you can prove, and maybe Job's getting a clue about what's going on, that you can prove that I have faith. Okay, I have faith. I have it. Now leave me. Just get away from me. Your attention is not helpful to me at this time.
Isn't that part of the definition of faith? To understand that some things are beyond our understanding? It's just innate that we have faith, and to try and understand too much sometimes is detrimental to our well-being.
Yeah, and I think when you start to apply rationality to the issues of faith, I always feel like you jump lanes. Like everybody always talks about Calvin. As Calvin was responsible for predestination, and then double predestination, those that are already predestined for heaven.
It's crazy.
The thing is, you go back to Calvin. I always want to say, go read Calvin. You know what Calvin was most interested in? He was most interested in humility in Christians. He wanted Christians to be humble. And what he was trying to do was to say, look, if you need to understand it this way, you don't take any credit for the fact that you have faith. You don't. You don't get any credit for it. Then his students were the ones who came along. His students who interpreted Calvin were the ones who said, yeah, and guess what? And you don't get any credit for going to hell either, because you were going to hell. And you want to scream. You want to scream when you read and you understand. I always used to tell my confirmation students in the Presbyterian Church, remember Calvin for two things. One is, Calvin believed in the big God. He believed in a God. J.B. Phillips wrote a book called Your God is Too Small. Calvin believed in a big God, bigger than that, bigger than what you're already thinking about. And where you go with it, or where you go with Calvin after that, that's your fault. And the other thing that Calvin believed was that human beings, in their pursuit of faith, needed to have an attitude of deep and abiding humility. A humility that would help us to love all humankind, all human beings, without taking any credit for ourselves for having faith, and for unduly piling on judgment and guilt on those who did not. And then people say to me, oh, you're a Presbyterian, are you a Calvinist? I say, yes, but I'm not anything of what you think Calvin is about. I'm not. I think there's a base lesson that is underneath even this text. This text in Job is it is pointing to, it's inviting us to, not to understanding. Job is saying, I don't understand any of this. But notice that in his lack of understanding, his conversation with God becomes like a conversation between two best friends. There is a known, untalked about relationship that exists between God and Job. And to me, that was the point that God was making in chapter 1. I have a relationship with this human being. And Job, strangely enough, in his request to tell God to walk off, is just simply reiterating that.
Yeah. I remember a few times when I've told people to get out of my life or that I wanted to leave, Yeah. But it's only people that you really, really, really love and care about. And
people that you are willing to trust how you're actually feeling with them.
Yeah. That whole...
Because how you're actually feeling may or may not be how you're going to feel 5 minutes from now. And the relationship is what keeps it connected through there. Yeah. Relationships that are deep, that are pointed to in the scripture and lifted up in the scripture, are not relationships that they are affected by what's happening, and they find a variety of expressions, but they endure. They endure. And Job, even in his lament, even in his railing at God, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, God, that you would make the world like this? Why would you do this? Are you trying to somehow squeeze devotion and alleluias out of human beings in difficult circumstances? And he comes back and says, what is your problem? If this is what you paying attention to us means, then could you ignore us? And now I'm going to tell you, now that's the link to chapter 6. Because that's the same message that Job had to his friend. If this is what you paying attention to me brings in my life, please ignore me. because I'd be better off on my own. Now, I don't know if that means that maybe Job is trying to uncover in Eliphaz a question of, are you really my friend or not? You know, and he's certainly delivering to his friend the results of his good intentions. And maybe a friend who's just well-intended and doesn't really have a love for you as a person will walk away when they realize that you're telling them you're not being helpful. Some people do. Kathy, you haven't said anything. Where's this hitting you?
I really didn't have anything to contribute in regards to it. I think that it's a very common and normal reaction to like leave me alone. Enough already. I don't know.
I was thinking about the times when I've been visiting as a pastor and the nurse walks in and she has another shot she has to give the person. And you look at the person's arm and they're just bruised and black and blue and there's nowhere to go. And I wonder, where does that helper, where does that caregiver go to in their mind?
Their rear end.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Give it to you in the back. But you hear what I'm saying? It's like, what happens in their mind that this person who's supposed to be receiving this care from them is now perceiving this caregiver as the source of their suffering, as the source of your torment. Like, are you kidding me? You're going to come in here and roll me over again? I finally just got comfortable. And so, I mean, isn't that part of the caregiving too? Is that the caregiving
I think that's like, even as a mother, as a nurse, as just a person, you force someone to do something that they don't want to do for their own good. And you just force them. You just make them do it. And but in Job, I think it's more like, I get that you are testing me, but you can stop now. I get it. We're done. You know, like, you can just stop. But I don't know if I'd have the guts to continue to believe. I think I'd start to curse, and because I do that a lot in my head, and you know, the filter would be lost in a situation like this.
Well, I think that what we talk about when we say I'd begin to curse, I think that's inside the function of lament. I think it is. I'll see if I can get this out in a way that's understandable. I have a lot of people that tell me that they're atheists, that they don't believe in God, and I don't really mean to be judgmental of them or take a sort of higher view, but I go, in my mind, I think, you haven't arrived at the place of not believing in God until you stopped talking. When you are cursing God, that is not the opposite of faith. Anymore.
Because you believe he's there.
Right. That's like a real atheist, and I believe they exist. They're out there. They're in the world. I have some friends that are real atheists. They're real atheists. They don't ever curse God. You know why? Because God, there's no, I mean, they might curse the car next to them, or they might like be really angry at the river or whatever. They don't have it in them to see life in terms of relationship to God, because they truly do not believe God is there. They just don't. They get angry. But when I meet a lot of people who say I don't believe in God, and then I sit down and I try to pattern my life to be a listener and to get to know people through like inviting them to share more about their life and their story. And I'm just going to say 9 out of 10, that may be overstated, but an awful lot of times what I hear from people who say I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, you're angry with God. You are angry with God. And I was in I know we've gone a little long this time, but I was in, for a long period of time, I was trying to work on some of my personal issues. And I was in a men's clergy group. It was all men, and we met for 2 hours every week. And the group was run by a clinical therapist. We were not just on our own. And at one point there were 7, and then there were 11 of us. And I had not really ever had an experience in my life where all the men in my life, their anger was always repressed. It was always underneath. And not, good or bad, that's just the facts. I was never really close in friendship with a man who was able to, in a kind of a healthy way, put their anger out in the open. And there were some times in that group where one man would become really angry with another man. And at one point the therapist said to me, "Lou, I notice you always sit by the door." and he wasn't wrong. Like, he wasn't wrong, because I didn't know how. I didn't have a healthy model. I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about, threat. I'm just talking about really getting angry with another person that you've committed in a relationship with, and just letting the anger out there. And then giving the other person, because there was a clinical psychologist present, giving the other person a chance to meet your anger. To meet it, to engage. Violence interrupts all that, Violence interrupts all that. Violence is an interruption to a normal progression of intimacy, which is anger. I'm like, what? What? And that's why I say, when people are angry with God, as a pastor, I feel like if they want to, then I want to invite them to figure out how to get the words out to express the anger. Because the Old Testament especially shows us God can handle it. God is not afraid of your anger. And God will not resort to violence when you become angry. That in the Old Testament and throughout the experience of Abraham, and look at Jacob and Job, in the picture of healthy relationships in the Old Testament with God, anger is always a healthy part of it. Always. And people say, oh, the Bible's a book about, God who gets angry. Yes, God gets angry. And human beings get angry. And if you have a model for how to accept anger as a part of intimacy, we don't, because often in our culture, anger erupts into violence and threat. And so somebody has to be afraid. Somebody has to be afraid when there's somebody who's angry. And that was my work in that group, was to work on staying in the room. I had nothing to fear. And I had everything to learn. And it's, I still think that's part of why I always feel like I'm an apologist for Job. The man really, really didn't just believe in God. He loved God. He loved God. And it's his love and deep abiding trust in God that leads him to say all that he says. the sad part is that God doesn't talk back.
Right.
And so he just gets angrier and angrier.
It's evident that his friends are the ones who talk back, and they're giving him help that's no help at all.
Right.
Because Job realizes that Eliphaz really still believes that Job did something to cause God's anger with him. Well, Job knows that's not true.
Right.
So, Eliphaz, get out of here. I mean, you're not helping. Maybe if Eliphaz, if he sat near the door and didn't leave when Job told him to, maybe he could have stuck around long enough to understand that Job's relation to God was a little different, and it didn't entail what Eliphaz thought it did. But that's not the story here. Poor Job has to be winnowed down, family gone, riches gone, friends gone. It's just you and me, God, and I'm going to find out something really elemental about my faith, about how you are, and about how I am. And I think that is the necessary part of this story of Job, that he has to be down to just God and Job.
Yeah.
Let's talk it out, God. Well, like you said, God's not talking too much, but I think Job will be gone, because again, we know the story. I think he will start to realize something more about himself, and that is the only way we can know God, is to know more about ourselves.
And I think that the vehicle for that, the missed opportunity for that in our lives and in Job's life, is the failure of his friends. It was the failure of his friends. You know, somebody once said, and it comes back to me from time to time, that when you preach the gospel in the pulpit, and you preach about the unconditional love of God, you must be aware as a preacher that if a person has never experienced unconditional love between themselves and another human being, then they have no idea what you're talking about. And so you can't, this is a faith, a journey that is always grounded in human relationships as well. Well, our understanding of God takes meaning in the incarnation of God in human flesh. So when the New Testament writers wrote about how their understanding of God exploded into grace and wonder and love, it's because they say, when we were with Jesus, he loved us unconditionally. God in the flesh. And so what doesn't happen for Job, it doesn't... Yeah, the opposite comes. The opposite comes. And that is God talk absent of any real understanding of God.
I was noticing verse 21, why do you not pardon my offense and take away my guilt?
Yeah.
Isn't that because of what his friends were saying?
Yeah, I don't know.
Has he gone into that?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Maybe they're having some headway. Maybe they're making some headway.
Yeah. Well.
Why have you made me your target? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity?
Yeah.
When Barbara read that, and I saw it there, I thought, oh, let's just pretend that's not there. Let's just pretend that's not there.
Right.
You know? And then Elaine goes along and goes, hey, what about this?
Yeah, I heard you.
Yeah, I know.
Isn't Job the oldest extant book that we have?
Yes.
Maybe there was a lot lost in the translation?
Maybe.
Okay.
That was my excuse. When I don't agree with something in the Bible, that's what it is. They translate it incorrectly.
Sometimes it's true, right?
Sometimes it's true. In fact, a lot of times it's true. So let's go with that. Let's just go that there must be some translation problems there.
I just think I think he's almost parroting what his friends said.
I do too. I do too. And I don't think that's, I think that the force of what is happening with Job is like trying on another pair of shoes. He's trying on this, he's trying on this, and he's trying on this, and he's like, because he asks the question, like the lead up to it is, let's see, where is it? If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of humanity? Why have you made me your target? And why have I become a burden to you? I think that Job is saying, if you're trying to make me sin, if you're trying to make me sin, and then watching, why don't you just forgive the sin? Like, why don't you just move on to what's next after that happens? Because I'm going to be dead in this process.
He does say that.
And in some ways, he's got it. He has it. He knows the unknowable secret. He's challenging God to say, are you just trying to see if I will sin? And all of us as our readers go, yeah, yes, you're close. You're very close, Job. And then Job says, so why don't you just forgive it already? Like, just forgive it. And let me then, like, because the last sentence is, for now I shall lie in the earth. You will seek me, but I shall not be. And so, that image, again, when you try to go adopt the worldview of these ancient Hebraic believers, is that to lie in the earth was the ultimate proof that you lived a just life. You lived a righteous life. If you did not, all the things that happened to Job were nothing compared to his body just being tossed upon the surface of the ground and being eaten by the birds and carried away. To be returned to the elements of the earth. To rest in peace. And so, in some ways, I think that is what he's saying. He's saying, just look, when I go to my grave, you're not going to be able to come find me and pick on me anymore. So what then? What then? All right. Well, I had a great time in discussion today. I hope you did too.
Thanks.
Yeah. I will see you next week. I'm gonna try to set up, for those of you that are here today, you're almost always here. Instead of a last minute invite, I'm gonna try to set up a regular meeting in which you'll get an email, but you'll get your email early. You'll just have to, when it's time to come on to the meeting, you'll have to go look it up. And still, again, we always have the caveat that if you're not in the group and you want to be in the group, just send an email to me or somebody in the group and we'll get you in. That seems to be the easiest way to do it. If you're watching live online, again, the invitation is always there. My email address is revlouie, R-E-V, as in Victor, L-O-U-I-E, at AOL.com. And you're welcome to join the conversation. You don't have to be a member of this church to be a part of this group. This is an open discussion group. We like the conversations back and forth. I saw Colette wave when I said you don't have to be a member of the church. Debbie also is a full-time, full-blooded member of this group, and that's how we roll. So send that email to me. I sometimes will say, well, send me a text, but I hesitate to give out my telephone number over the live stream. So the email I can deal with. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you very much, all of you. Be well, and look forward to carrying on next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.